Struggling widow helped a stranger in the tornado. Later realized the cowboy owned half the county. Dustwater County, Kansas Territory. Spring, 1884. The sky had turned green. That was the only warning Dustwater got before the winds came, howling like a devil unchained across the prairie. The town bell clanged wildly as shopkeepers shuttered windows, mothers gathered children, and ranchers rushed to secure their livestock. Dustwater had seen storms before, but not like this. Not the kind that split trees like matchsticks and peeled roofs off barns as if they were paper. Maybelline Crane tightened the scarf around her chin as the first wave of dust hit her face. She was halfway through locking the gate to the west paddock when she saw the funnel forming in the sky, a black, twisting column spinning from the heavens, heading straight for her land. She turned back toward the barn. "Come on, Daisy," she cried, yanking on the rope tied to her mare. The horse reared, terrified, but Maybelline held firm, dragging the animal toward the half-collapsed stable. Wind tore at her skirts, pulled her hair loose from its braid. She was almost there when she saw him. Lying face down near the broken fence line was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, unmoving. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, staining the dirt below. His coat flapped wildly in the wind, and one boot had come halfway off. Maybelline blinked, thinking it a hallucination. But then the dust shifted, and she saw his chest rise and fall. He was alive. "Lord Almighty," she muttered. The wind shrieked louder now. The funnel cloud was closer, devouring everything in its path. She had seconds to choose, the mare or the man. "Sorry, girl," she whispered, slapping Daisy on the hindquarters. The mare bolted toward the grove of trees behind the house. Maybelline ran to the stranger. He was heavy, dead weight, taller than her by at least a head, but she crouched low, hooked her arms under his shoulders, and began to drag. "Hang on," she hissed through gritted teeth, legs burning as she fought the pull of the storm. "You picked a hell of a day to drop from the sky." She pulled him across the yard, past the swinging gate, through the broken cellar door, and into the storm shelter. She slammed the door shut just as the wind screamed like a banshee outside, rattling the hinges and shoving against the frame like it wanted in. Inside the cellar, the only light came from a single oil lamp flickering in the corner. Maybelline collapsed beside the man, panting, her face streaked with mud and sweat. The stranger was unconscious, his face pale under the dirt. She fumbled for her canteen, uncorked it, and trickled a few drops onto his cracked lips. He stirred, his eyes fluttered open, blue, distant, confused. "Hey," she said softly, "you are safe now, do you hear me?" He tried to sit up, winced, and dropped back. "You have a nasty bump on your head, I would not move if I were you." He stared at the ceiling, then turned to her, trying to focus. "Where?" His voice was raw. "Where am I?" "Dustwater County," she said. "You were lying in my yard. Can you remember what happened?" His brow furrowed, his lips moved. Then, barely audible, he whispered, "Colt McCrae." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, like it carried the weight of something lost, sent a chill down her spine. She leaned closer. "Is that your name?" He nodded weakly before slipping back into unconsciousness. Maybelline sat beside him, staring at the storm door as wind howled outside. "Colt McCrae," she whispered to the dark. "Well, mister, you better live long enough to tell me who the hell you are." Dustwater County, days after the storm. The road to town was gone. The tornado had ripped a scar through the land, tearing up fences, uprooting trees, and leaving the only bridge to Dustwater half submerged in floodwater. For the time being, Maybelline Crane and the man she had dragged from death were on their own. He woke on the second morning, still disoriented, still pale, but breathing easier. She sat by the fire with a pot of coffee warming and a revolver within reach. Trust had never come easy, not after everything she had lost. His eyes opened slowly. He stared at the low-beamed ceiling, blinking at the unfamiliar space. She stood and approached with careful steps. "You are awake," she said, setting the mug aside. "You had a fever yesterday, but it broke." He turned to her, confused. Where am I? My place, she answered plainly. Just outside Dustwater. He tried to sit up, grimaced, and leaned back again. What happened? I found you in my yard during the storm, head bleeding, half dead. Do you remember anything? His brow creased. He closed his eyes, searching his thoughts. Nothing clear, he said. Just wind, a horse, then nothing. Do you remember your name? A pause, then, Colt McRae. Maybelline studied him. Same name he had whispered in the storm shelter. Well, Colt, she said, I suppose we are neighbors now. He tried to smile, but it came out weary. You hungry? He nodded, and she ladled soup into a chipped bowl. Over the next few days, Colt regained strength. His wounds healed quickly, but the gaps in his memory remained, large blank spaces he could not explain. He asked little, spoke less, but he worked. As soon as he could walk without stumbling, he began helping around the ranch. He repaired the broken gate, chopped wood, patched the holes in the barn roof. He was quiet but capable, his hands steady, his gaze alert. There was something deliberate in how he moved, like a man used to control, but no longer certain of where he stood. Maybelline watched him. Not with suspicion, not entirely, but with the wary curiosity of someone who had learned long ago not to mistake manners for safety. Still, she could not deny what she saw. The man had dignity. He never complained, never boasted. When he spoke, it was with careful thought. He asked about her land, her animals, how she had survived the storm. And when she told him briefly, without drama, that she was a widow, he simply nodded, offering no pity. One afternoon, while repairing a fence, Maybelline handed him a piece of cedar plank to mark for measurement. You want me to sign it so I know it's mine? He joked. She smirked. You remember how to write? Guess we will see. He knelt, took the pencil she offered, and scrawled something across the wood. She leaned over to look, and froze. It was not just handwriting. It was a signature, sharp, flowing, unmistakable. The same signature she had seen stamped on the sacks of grain delivered from McRae Ranch, the same name etched into fence posts across half the county. She had hated that name once, associated it with power, with land that her husband could never afford to rent. McRae. Her throat tightened. Something wrong? Colt asked, noticing her change. She straightened quickly. No, just. You write real fancy for a man who cannot remember his own past. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She turned away, heart racing. Who was this man she had brought into her home, and why did his hand remember something his mind had forgotten? That night, she stared at the name carved into the plank, the firelight casting it in gold and shadow. Colt McRae. She did not know yet whether he was friend or danger. But one thing was certain now. He was not just some ranch hand lost in a storm. The memories came in fragments. A flash of hooves pounding against dry earth, the smell of smoke, the scream of a horse, then a gunshot, sharp, sudden, and nothing. Colt would wake in the middle of the night, sweat on his brow, fists clenched in the sheets, unsure if it was a dream or a warning. Maybelline heard him stir but never asked. She gave him space. She gave him time. And still, the questions hung unspoken between them. He spent most mornings fixing fences, repairing tools, or hauling debris from the tornado's wake. It was quiet work, the kind a man could lose himself in. Maybelline kept busy too, milking, baking, managing what little livestock she had left, but her eyes often strayed to him. There was something about Colt that did not match the story she had created in her head. He moved with too much precision. He studied the land like he had memorized it. His hands were rough from labor, but his posture, the way he carried himself, it spoke of someone used to being listened to. Still, she said nothing, until the rider came. It was nearly dusk when she saw the figure on the ridge, a dark silhouette against the fading sun, galloping fast toward her land. She stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, narrowing her eyes. The man slowed as he approached, dust kicking up behind him. He was middle-aged, weathered, wearing a thick riding coat and a battered hat. His horse was lathered with sweat. "Anyone here by the name of Colt?" he called, voice rough but urgent. Maybelline hesitated. Colt was inside, washing up after the day's work. "Who's asking?" The rider swung down from his saddle, breathing hard. "Name's Tom Wilkins. I work at McCrae Ranch. Been searching for the boss near 2 weeks now." Maybelline's grip tightened. Colt stepped out of the barn, drying his hands with a rag. His eyes met the rider's and froze. Tom's mouth opened. Sweet mercy. He dropped his hat, crossed the yard in 3 strides, and clasped Colt's shoulders. "Sir, we thought you were dead." Colt stared at him, bewildered. "I know you." "It's me, Tom, your foreman. Don't you remember?" Colt looked away, shaken. "Pieces, flashes. I didn't know if they were real." Tom laughed, half sobbing. "They're real, all right. Lord, the ranch has been in chaos. No one knew where you'd gone. That mare came back without you, shot in the flank, saddle ripped open. We feared the worst." Maybelline stepped off the porch, heart pounding. "Hold on, this man, he's Colt McCrae?" Tom blinked at her. "Yes, ma'am. He owns half this county." She stared at Colt, throat suddenly dry. "The McCrae? As in McCrae Ranch? McCrae Lands? All of it?" Colt looked at her, eyes soft. "I didn't know. Not for sure. Not until now." She took a step back, the truth settling like a stone in her chest. She had saved the man who owned the land beneath her feet, the man her late husband used to curse whenever rent came due, the man who, if he wished, could buy out every acre within 100 miles. And she had made him soup, let him sleep under her roof, watched him split fence posts like any ranch hand. Colt took a slow step toward her. "I am sorry I did not tell you. I truly did not remember." She nodded, still reeling. He looked down, then back up at her, voice low. "You helped me when I had nothing. When I was no one. You saw a man bleeding in your yard and chose to pull him out of the storm." She said nothing. Colt's gaze didn't waver. "You saved me, not knowing I had land or cattle or men to call on. You saved me as I was." He stepped closer. "And that, Maybelline, is worth more than every acre I own." The carriage ride to McCrae Ranch was silent. Colt had insisted, gently, firmly, that Maybelline come stay at the estate while her house was being repaired. "It is the least I can do," he said. "You should not spend another night patching holes with burlap and hope." She had hesitated, pride rising like a wall inside her. But the truth was plain. Her home was broken, her pantry nearly empty, and she had nowhere else to go. Still, she was not prepared for what waited beyond the wrought iron gates. McCrae Ranch was not a ranch. It was a kingdom. The long gravel road led to a massive house with wraparound porches, 2 chimneys puffing soft smoke, and grand columns like something out of a southern novel. Dozens of hands worked the grounds, men tending to horses, women carrying trays, boys running messages. Everyone moved with practiced rhythm, like they knew their place and had no need to question it. Maybelline stepped out of the carriage and immediately regretted coming. She felt the stares. Men tipped hats politely, but the women only glanced, then whispered. Inside, the house was even grander. Chandeliers sparkled above velvet curtains. Floors gleamed like mirrors. A maid took her bag before she could protest. Someone offered tea in fine china. Colt stayed close to her side but never hovered. He was courteous, even warm, but something in his posture had changed. Back here, he was no longer the man splitting wood behind her barn. He was McCrae. He belonged. She did not. That feeling only deepened when she met Josephine. She entered the sitting room like a wind in silk, tall, elegant, mid-50s, her silver hair pulled into a twist that glinted like polished steel. "So this is the famous Maybelline," Josephine said, smiling with her mouth, not her eyes. Maybelline stood awkwardly, unsure whether to curtsy or shake hands. Colt stepped forward. "Josephine helped raise me after my mother died. She is the woman who kept this house from falling apart," Josephine finished. "And now I see Colt has brought home a guest." Maybelline straightened. "I am only here until repairs are done on my place." "Of course," Josephine purred. "And what a kind thing it is to host those in need." The words felt clean, but they cut. Colt's jaw tensed. "She saved my life, Josephine. She is not a guest, she is family." Maybelline blinked at him. Josephine only smiled again, then sipped her tea without blinking. That night, Colt hosted a small dinner, just a few local landowners and their wives, all dripping in lace and polish. Maybelline was given a borrowed dress, a pale blue gown too soft for her calloused hands. She sat beside Colt, quiet as the table clinked and laughed. They talked of cattle prices, of weather patterns, of investments. No one asked her anything. Until one woman, young and sharp-eyed, leaned across the table with a coy grin. "So, Miss Crane, what is it that you do, other than rescuing unconscious millionaires in storms?" The table chuckled. Maybelline smiled tightly. "I run a farm, milk my own cow, grow what I can, and clean what no one else will." The woman tilted her head. "How quaint." Then, like venom dressed in velvet, she added, "Some folks are born to lead, others to scrub." The words landed like a slap. Colt's fork stopped mid-air. Maybelline stood, calmly but with fire in her spine. "You are right," she said. "I scrub, I fix, I break my back to live, and when a man fell in my yard bleeding, I did not ask how much land he owned before saving him." Silence fell. She looked at Colt, who was already rising from his chair. "You do not need to stay," he said quietly. But Maybelline was already walking out, back straight, heart pounding, knowing full well that dirt under the nails was no shame when the soul was clean. The note arrived without a name, tucked beneath her breakfast plate. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. No flourishes, no warmth. "Leave now. Dustwater does not welcome parasites. Stay away from Colt McCrae while you still can." Maybelline stared at the words, her fingers curling around the paper until it crumpled. Her appetite vanished. She rose from the table, eyes scanning the polished dining room. No one met her gaze. The days at McCrae Ranch had grown colder, not in weather, but in air. Whispers followed her down corridors. Polite smiles came a second too late. And Josephine, with her impeccable posture and steel eyes, had stopped pretending to care. Colt noticed. "You seem quieter," he said one morning as they walked the paddock. "I'm being watched," she replied. He stopped, his expression tightening. "By who?" "I do not know, but someone wants me gone." That same afternoon, Colt called for the ranch books, the ledgers his father once kept under lock and key. He had avoided them for years, too busy riding fence lines and wrangling cattle to dig through numbers. But now, something felt off. The pages did not add up. Missing funds, duplicate purchases, land taxes paid to counties they did not border. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, flipping faster. He brought the books to the study, Maybelline trailing behind. "You understand numbers better than I do," he said, laying them out. "Tell me if I am imagining this." They worked through the night. Maybelline made columns of inconsistencies, circled figures that did not match receipts. What emerged was a pattern, subtle, spread out over years, but consistent. Someone was bleeding the estate from the inside. At the center of it all was one name, Emmett Kessler. He had been foreman for over a decade, promoted after Colt's father passed, the kind of man who smiled wide and bowed to power, always present, but never questioned. His initials were on every document that did not match. By dawn, Colt's face was grim. "We need proof," he said. Proof came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Josephine invited Maybelline to tea. The gesture was unexpected, unsettling, like a fox setting the table for a hen. Still, Maybelline went. She wore no jewelry, no silk, just her best cotton dress and a quiet wariness. The parlor was sunlit, the tea already steeped. Josephine poured with grace, never looking her in the eye. "You must be tired," she said. "Living under a roof not yours, having every eye upon you." Maybelline sipped carefully. "I am used to that. Life does not always offer comfort. Josephine's smile thinned. Perhaps not, but it offers place. Some women know theirs. Maybelline set her cup down. I am not here to climb ladders or chase titles. I saved a man's life, that is all. Josephine stirred her tea. Some would say, too much has already been saved. The words were still hanging when Maybelline's stomach lurched. A heat crept up her neck. Her hands began to tremble. The room tilted, not sharply, but enough to make her blink hard. She reached for the table, knocked over the saucer. Josephine did not move. The door burst open. Colt rushed in, eyes darting to Maybelline, then the untouched cup in Josephine's hand. What happened? Maybelline tried to speak but only managed a breathless whisper. He crossed the room in 3 steps, caught her before she collapsed, then turned to the servant frozen in the doorway. Get the doctor, he barked. Then, lifting the teacup, voice shaking with fury. Who touched her tea? Josephine rose slowly, elegant as ever. You invited danger into our home, Colt. Do not be surprised when danger answers. He glared at her. If she dies, you are coming with me to the gallows. Maybelline's head slumped against his shoulder. His heart pounded like a war drum. No more doubt. Someone wanted her gone, not with whispers, but with poison. The days after the poisoning passed in a blur of whispered apologies, guarded glances, and long silences. Colt kept Maybelline close, refusing to leave her side until her color returned, until the tremble in her hands had faded and her voice grew steady again. He brought her broth with his own hands, sat with her while she slept. When she stirred in the night, his voice was always there, low, grounding, as if to remind her she was not alone. You should have sent me away, she told him once, curled beneath a wool blanket by the hearth. He shook his head. I would have torn this house down brick by brick before letting you walk out of it. As her strength returned, so did her spirit. And with it, something neither of them had spoken of, but both felt in the quiet spaces between. They rode out one morning, just the 2 of them, into the open land beyond McRae Ranch. The air was clean, the earth still scarred from the storm but slowly healing. Colt's horse led with easy confidence. Maybelline's followed close behind. They stopped at a ridge overlooking the valley, where the wind was brisk and the sky stretched endless above. A fire crackled between them, built of broken twigs and dried sage. They sat on opposite logs, knees drawn close, boots muddy from the ride. Maybelline held her cup of coffee with both hands. I buried him out back, she said, voice even. Next to the peach tree we planted our first summer. Colt looked at her. My husband, she added. He was stubborn, thought he could fix the harvester himself. It crushed his leg. He died 2 days later from the fever. I am sorry. She nodded. So was I. For a long time. He waited. I stayed because I did not want to run. I told myself I would keep the land going, for him. But sometimes I wonder if I stayed because it was the only thing that did not leave me. Colt tossed a twig into the fire. Everyone stays for something. She turned to him. And you? Why do you stay here? In that big house, surrounded by people who want your name but not your heart? He stared into the flames. The wind tugged at his coat. My father was a tyrant, he said finally. Never raised his voice, never raised his hand. But he raised expectations so high, I stopped being a son and became an heir. Maybelline's breath caught. I learned to ride before I could read. I was managing men twice my age at 16. I could quote cattle prices faster than I could name a single friend. He shaped me into something useful, not loved, just useful. Maybelline moved closer to the fire, her knees nearly touching his. Maybe we both forgot what it feels like, she said softly. To be chosen, not because of duty or habit or debt, but because someone sees you and stays. Colt looked at her then, really looked. The flames danced in her eyes, casting gold across her face, the wind lifting strands of her hair in wild rhythm. He leaned forward, voice quiet as breath. You did not just save my life, Maybelline, he said. You saved the part of me I thought had burned out long ago. She stared at him, her heart suddenly louder than the wind. The part of me that still believes in more than land, more than legacy. The part that aches to feel something true. He reached across the space between them, took her hand gently in his. She did not pull away. The storm had quieted, but the danger had not passed. Rumors began to churn across Dustwater like dust in a dry wind. Whispers that Colt McCrae had gone soft, that his mind had cracked after the tornado, that his judgment could no longer be trusted. Some said he had nearly died and come back different. Others claimed the stranger in his house, the widow, had sunk her claws deep into the family fortune. At the center of it all was Emmett Kessler. The longtime foreman had stayed quiet in recent weeks, but his influence moved like poison beneath the surface. He filed petitions, sent letters to the county council, and stirred old board members who once swore loyalty to Colt's father. He submitted forged evaluations and a signed statement from a distant cousin claiming Colt had exhibited erratic behavior and signs of delusion. It was enough. Colt was summoned before the county council, 5 men in stiff collars who oversaw land rights and inheritances. If Emmett proved that Colt was mentally unfit to manage his holdings, the council could remove him from authority and place the estate under external stewardship, a polite phrase for takeover. The hearing was set for Thursday. Maybelline found the proof on Wednesday. She had been combing through old storage records in the barn, tracing grain shipments that had never arrived, tax receipts that had been doctored. The math was a mess, until she noticed something out of place in the far corner of the tack room. A crate, half covered in moldy canvas. Inside it, she found a rusted ledger, wrapped in oilskin. Tucked within its pages was a folded land contract, bearing Colt's forged signature. The deal transferred 30 acres of prime McRae land to a shell company, one that Emmett controlled. The signature was close, but Maybelline had seen Colt sign his name with clarity. This was not his hand. She brought the ledger straight to Colt. "I have seen this trick before," she said. "My late husband lost half a season's harvest to a fake buyer who forged a note just like this." Colt read the page in silence, then looked up. His eyes burned. "They are not just trying to take the ranch," he said. "They are trying to erase me." They went to the hearing together the next morning. The room was full. Councilmen sat behind a long oak table. Emmett stood to the side, arms folded smugly, flanked by lawyers in pressed suits. Josephine sat in the front row, lips tight. Colt entered wearing a dark coat and no smile. At his side, Maybelline in her plain dress and boots, holding the ledger close. The accusations were read aloud. Colt listened without interrupting. Claims of instability, erratic behavior, dangerous impulsivity. They brought up the days he had gone missing, his bizarre choice to take in a stranger, the mismanaged funds. Then Colt stood. "Is it strange," he said, "that I trusted the woman who saved my life more than the men who lined their pockets with my land?" A few murmurs. He gestured to Maybelline, who stepped forward, placed the forged deed on the table. "This document was hidden in a barn stall. It proves a fraudulent land transfer," she said, "signed by a man who was barely conscious when it was dated. The beneficiary? A company managed by Emmett Kessler." The council examined the pages. One leaned back, frowning deeply. Emmett paled. Colt stepped closer, voice strong. "I have been called many things in this town. Heir, horseman, fool. But if you believe my name is worth less than a lie dressed in paperwork, I will walk away from it all." He turned, took Maybelline's hand in his. "But if there is still honor in this county, then know this. The woman beside me has more integrity in her calloused hands than any man who has ever sat at this table." Silence hung. Then, slowly, one councilman nodded. Another followed. The vote was cast. Colt McCrae would remain the rightful owner of McCrae Ranch. Emmett was escorted out in silence, his smirk gone. Josephine said nothing, just stood, gathered her gloves, and left the hall. Maybelline squeezed Colt's hand. They had not just defended land, they had reclaimed truth. The gavel fell, and with it, so did the last shadow of the storm. Emmett was arrested 2 days later, the ledgers, forged deeds, and Maybelline's testimony leaving no room for doubt. He left McRae Ranch in shackles, eyes hollow, reputation in ruins. Josephine, for her part, vanished quietly. She did not argue or fight. She simply packed her trunks, withdrew her name from the Board of Trustees, and left behind a legacy of whispers and wine glasses. With the estate now secure, Colt made his first decision as master of the land. He began to give it away. Not all, not foolishly, but to the tenant farmers who had worked his father's soil for decades without ever calling it their own. He signed deeds with steady hands, granting parcels to families who had never hoped to own more than their breath. "The land belongs to those who love it," he told Maybelline one evening, watching the sunset spill over the fields like firelight. She smiled, hand resting gently over her belly. "It's what your father would never have done." He nodded. "That's why it matters now." The mansion still stood, tall and cold behind its iron gates, but Maybelline never stepped foot in it again. Not after the trial, not after the poison, not after the truth had aired in every golden hallway. Instead, she chose the ridge, the same hill where she had once built a fire with Colt, where he had first said words that made her heart unfold like spring. They built a house there, small, modest, facing the valley, facing the storm. Colt cussed as he pounded fence posts into stubborn earth, sweat clinging to his brow. Maybelline planted lavender by the porch, her fingers pressing gently into soil already blooming with second chances. The house rose slowly, so did laughter. Each evening, they sat on the porch steps with mugs of coffee or hands resting together in silence. No silk, no servants, just wood, wind, and the kind of love that took root deep. One afternoon, Maybelline paused in her work, wiping dirt from her hands, and called to him. "Colt." He looked up, hammer still in hand. "We might need to add a second room." He tilted his head. "Why's that?" She placed a hand on her stomach, not quite showing, but almost. "We're going to need more space for the three of us." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he dropped the hammer and crossed the yard in 5 strides, arms wrapping tight around her, forehead pressed to hers, his voice rough with something deeper than joy. "3 hearts under one roof," he whispered. "I'll build 1,000 rooms if that's what it takes. And God." That night, wind moved gently through the grass. Maybelline lit the lamp in their new window. Colt watched her from the fence line, the scent of lavender and pine drifting through the dusk. And the house stood, not grand, not gilded, but alive. A home, made from storm and kindness, built by choice, held together not by bloodlines or legacies, but by love that had weathered every wind and chose, again and again, to stay. And that is the story of how a storm brought down walls and built a home instead. From a lonely widow's porch to the heart of the most powerful ranch in Dustwater, Maybelline and Colt chose each other, not for names, or land, or legacy, but for love that held fast through betrayal, bullets, and bitter winds. Because out here in the Wild West, survival is just the beginning. If this story stirred something in your heart, hit that hype button, drop us a comment, and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of courage, connection, and the kind of love that outlasts even the fiercest storm.